Hi, it's time for another Business Analysis Live. My name is Susan Moore. I'm the Community Engagement Manager at IIBA.
And my name is Scott Bennett. I'm the Manager of Business Analysis here at the International Institute of Business Analysis. Thank you for joining us today. Today we're going to be talking about solving the wrong problem.
Yeah, nobody wants to do that, but I feel like that happens sometimes, right?
Yeah, that's right. And it's one of those things that we can walk through today. We've got a special guest that's going to join us today, and we're going to talk about problem solving. One of my pet peeves is someone comes back from a conference in my organization and they say, "Hey, I saw this great new piece of software. It does X, Y, Z." Well, that's great, but what's the problem you're looking to solve?
Yeah, that's right. And today I'm going to use a personal example of when there was a problem that was solved incorrectly and the impacts that had. And I think our special guest today, is going to help us to understand why solving the wrong problem can be expensive and have other impacts, maybe in ways we don't think.
Hello, Susan. Hello, Scott. Thank you for having me on this amazing platform. Thank you.
That's
Yeah.
fantastic. Catello, you're from South Africa. Tell us a little bit about your background.
So I am an IBA former president, IBA South Africa former president, and currently I am part of the IBA's board, the global board. I have been a business analyst for as long as I can remember, and I've been, working on digital transformation projects and all things IT.
Well, and you should add to that you were also a speaker. You are a speaker and were a speaker this year at BBC, and that's when this idea of solving the wrong problem, well, that frankly caught our attention.
That's it.
So
Yeah.
we wanted to invite you on to talk about this because I think again, we want to solve the right problems, but sometimes we do things that really don't help us to solve the right problems. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. And for those of you that are listening live, we are live. So if you see a mistake, it's happening. For those of you who are watching this on YouTube or on our podcast, you can give us feedback. You can reach us at email us at live@iiba.org. But those of you that are live today, you can ask your questions and we will take them live today.
Yeah, that's right. Because you might have some questions about this as well. Well, let's get started. Um, so, Othello, when you and I were talking just the other day, we were talking about what one of the symptoms of solving the wrong problem might be, and the first part of that is we jump into solution mode. Maybe we have a time crunch, or maybe we've got the right people in the room for a limited amount of time, and we go, let's just we don't need to think about what the problem is. Let's just solve something. Is that a problem?
Yeah, no, I think you've said it well, Susan. I think one of the biggest contributors to solving for the wrong problem is jumping into solution mode. And there are many problems with jumping into solution mode. One of those problems being that solution mode is riddled with assumptions. You have very limited understanding of the problem. You don't understand its breadth and its width to be making a solution or to be recommending a solution at the back of that very limited information. There are many other problems with regards to the constraints of the problem, the dependencies, the impact, etc., etc. So people don't always afford themselves the time to really understand it and then just make these particular assumptions. There's also bias. I think we all have some level of bias, and we then need certain, assistance. For instance, if there's a bias like a confirmation or availability bias, you'll need to have a team that has divergent views and that's willing to speak up and challenge your input for a particular solution. So bias is a second or one of the second reasons why people jump into solution mode and why they end up solving for the wrong problem. The other one is ego. Sometimes you'll get one person who has a big ego and they'll throw what their idea of the solution is, and then everyone has to move along and try to solve for it. But that doesn't really always work because that particular solution or proposal may have lacked some humility, and it also didn't allow for creativity because they've already thrown it in and everyone has to align and follow through. The other problem is team structure. So in some cases, you get teams that are structured in a way that people don't have the ability, the freedom to express their divergent views. So they end up sticking to one way of doing things, and they devote their energy to one way of doing things, which lacks, the diverse views and the inputs that other people may have, which then enable the team structure and also the ultimate solution to be improved. There are many other reasons, like maybe the last one I'll speak to is just simplism, where people have an illusion, of simplicity without the hard work. There is certain things that you have to do before you can get to the best solution. You'll have to be able to define, you'll have to be able to structure, then analyze, etc., etc. So there are many reasons why I'd say jumping into solution mode is a problem, but we can delve into it in other times or in other conversations as well. But those are the four I'd like to list for now, Susan.
Yeah. I know as we were talking about this, it made me think about one of my own scenario that I was kind of alluding to at the top of this, and where I've been a headache sufferer for many, many years, and I went to one medical professional who told me after his exam that, well, women just have headaches. And he handed me some pills, and I thought, oh, okay. Well, this doesn't seem like it's going to solve the problem. And I think that checked a couple of boxes that you just talked about, which is check for bias, check for assumptions, check for illusion of simplicity. Here, take a pill. That's going to help. It wasn't until much later when I found a professional who really did the work of understanding what are all of the different things going on with you that they could actually properly diagnose me. But now you think about that on a project in an organization. That's a lot of time, money, a lot of opportunity lost. So there's real impacts when we jump to the solution before we really understand the problem.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of a natural process too, right? As human beings, we solve problems every day. It could be the smallest thing. If you drop something, you got to pick it up. And I think our minds are geared to solving things. But as business analysis professionals, we're trained to step back and say, well, where's this coming from? What do we do? And there's a number of tools that we can use to help do that and bring people to realize what are the root causes and how to solve the problem.
Yeah. So let's talk about that because that is one of the things that we do as business analysis professionals. How can we help to solve those problems?
So I think I loved what Scott mentioned about stepping back. Take some time, step back and look at the situation in a different light. Also try aspects like reframing. So instead of framing the problem in one way or defining the problem in one way, define it in another way. I'll give an example. Instead of saying, how can we solve the problem? Try saying, how can we avoid the problem? That just creates innovation in how you think about the problem. Another way you can reframe or define it is instead of defining it as a problem, which is quite negative, you can define it as an opportunity. That alone, changes the way you view this particular problem and excites you. It creates a challenge that you want to sort or solve for instead of, taking you through a negative way of thinking. There are many other ways that you can do the structuring of the problem, and these are just some of the tools that you'll find in the BABOK. Those include root cause analysis. You can also have decision trees where you start and you look at the problem from its tree, then you take the problem to the leaves, to the branches, to the roots. And that's just how you break this problem down into logical steps. And then you can also then start prioritizing what you fix or sort for first. It's very important to be able to break this problem down and not be overwhelmed or start being anxious, by this particular problem. There are other tools like SWOT analysis, having to look at the problem at the strengths, the weaknesses of this organization or the problem, the opportunities, the threats. You've got, you can do fishbone diagramming, decision matrix, brainstorming, very, very important. Trust the input from your team and brainstorm this with them to try and find what the real problem is and define it well, and then also to try and find the best logical solution for it. I'd also know, or I'd also like to add design thinking. And the reason why I want to add design thinking is very instrumental because it really helps you to empathize, which is something we talk about a lot, but we don't always do. But to empathize with your user and fully understand their needs, their pain points, etc., and then to do the defining and the ideating, the prototyping, testing before you actually implement the solution. So there's certain steps that it'll also provide, which will help as some of the tools in problem solving, but it's not an exhaustive list. Try to use as many as you can if possible. Because you just never know which one will work. But I love the first answer that Scott gave, which is step back, take some time to breathe.
Yeah. Yeah, give yourself a little time to think about it before you just jump in. Scott.
Mhm. Yeah, and Gathello, you talked about the tools that we can use as business analysis professionals. And I think let's talk a little bit about the other side, the emotional intelligence, the sort of team building, the collaboration. I can imagine some of these tools are very difficult to use in an environment where you've got a lot of conflict.
Yeah,
But if you've got a team that really gels, it probably flows better, right?
definitely. Yeah, that goes without saying. That becomes another problem. Just the team dynamics become, and sometimes the major problem before you can get to the minor problems. And in some cases, just starting off with sorting out those team dynamics becomes the first major solution that then makes everything else so much easier. So instead of fighting and working through this unnecessary tension, or sorry, no, not fighting through it, but instead of ignoring the tension that exists and then trying to just solve for the business problems, maybe start with solving for this tension that exists. There's many ways you can do that. Firstly, there could be team building exercises. There could be opportunities for people to just speak up and share how they deeply, honestly feel about certain situations in the working environment, etc., etc. Because as you rightfully said, they tend to inhibit creativity. They tend to inhibit the solution being, the best solution that can be deployed, that will be, of value to everyone, including the consumers. So sometimes that is definitely the biggest problem in most cases.
Yeah, one
We
thing I've noticed too is it's a cultural thing. So as I've worked with global teams and Susan has as well, there are different cultures that have different ways of reacting to things, where some of them are very hierarchical, whereas others are very flat and open. So it may be the culture of the organization that you're working in or the society that you're working in. So one thing that might work for me, for example, might not work for Susan, which might work for you. So I think it's also understanding the environment and how that works for you.
Yeah, and that's where I was going to go, because sometimes we get so focused on trying to deconstruct a particular problem when really the first thing we might need to do is go up a level and take a look at factors like the politics, the culture, the environment. Like, there are things that could be impacting that problem that can make it worse, or that if you can deconstruct that piece, if you can take that piece away, then at least I think, Gathello, did you say a problem in a problem? Because I feel like sometimes that's what we've created, right? It's like an onion. We go, oh well,
Yeah,
we can solve this one thing, but yeah, there's still something else that we've got to solve, even if we're trying to take away these layers of issues.
Yeah, well said.
that's true.
Mhm.
That's true. If you can take that problem into a high level problem, and then also find a high level solution for it, it makes it so much easier sometimes. Instead of being stuck in that low level, departmental or functional area, try and look at it from a strategic perspective. Ask the teams or hire or the executives, about what the strategies of this organization. You've spoken about pestalgy, which is another way you can analyze things to understand it from a much higher level. And a lot of the times, those type of solutions tend to have real impact. They have real value because they were seen from a much higher level perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we don't often consider just how many times problems are they're not just one thing. That was that illusion of simplicity that you talked about. It's not
Yeah.
just that one thing. It is usually a variety of things. Actually, I'm gonna share this, and I'm gonna give Blake a shout out. Hey, Blake. So Blake's our sales director here. He's got, I think, what is a great meme for problems, right? There's all those layers.
Mm.
Um, so, um, yeah. So you got to take care of all of those pieces. Sometimes I was thinking about, whenever we talk about techniques, we always talk about measurements. Like, how do we measure that we're really solving this? And sometimes the measure of identifying the right problem isn't that you've solved the problem, but that the problem begins to change over
Yeah.
time. That can be a way that you can measure, are the efforts that we're taking to deconstruct and solve, are they helpful? So,
Yeah.
yeah, there's that.
Another thing to that is also sometimes the problem may not go away, but your perception of the problem may change. And that's a solution on its own. Because now you perceive it differently, then you're able to employ more creative ways to think about it. And that's all about reframing and redefining the problem. It really helps from that perspective. Another way to also consider is being able to tell between glass problems and plastic problems. Some
Mm,
problems are glass problems, meaning they are costly and they have devastating effects if they are not fixed. And others are plastic problems, meaning it's not going to be something that's going to cause the world to end if it's not sorted or fixed within a particular point of time. So then you can start prioritizing what you solve for based on glass problem or versus plastic problem approach. There's so many ways that you can solve for problems. Just be open and understanding of the fact that there's no one size fits all for all the problems.
yeah. And I think that is a good piece of advice. Don't constrain yourself with one approach to solving problems, because I know we were just talking about climate change when we were getting together today, and how really it's, what did you call it? You called it a wicked problem. I mean, I
Yeah,
think
it's a
that's a
bigger
thing.
problem. It's one that's complex.
Yeah, that's very complex. Something like climate change. We can't just do one thing
Yeah.
to solve climate change. We have to do a variety of things, right? And they're not all the same kinds of issues. So it's a good thing to remember. Well, let's see. Do we want to maybe take some questions? We do have a couple of
Just before we pop one up,
yeah.
Catella, you had an awesome quote in your presentation at BBC. I just want to put it up on the screen here to share it with everyone. If I were given 1 hour to save the planet, I would spend 59 minutes defining the problem and 1 minute resolving it. Albert Einstein. I thought that was a fantastic quote.
It's so
Yeah.
much easier to solve a problem that you understand. 50% of our problems can be solved just by understanding the problem. And a lot of the times when you don't understand them, you end up frustrating everyone around you because you're trying to solve for the wrong problem. And as you've mentioned, Susan, it's very costly.
It is, and the thing about this quote is that, think about that. If there really were a countdown to the Earth, being destroyed, I would imagine there's a project manager somewhere thinking, Albert, what's taking so long? We gotta do something, right? But you're correct. When you can understand what the problem is, many times that solution or these solutions can become self-evident. So I think that also is a great one. So let's see. All right, so I'm gonna put a couple of things in here. We were talking earlier about that one of the things that can prohibit us from solving the problem is this idea of somebody having way more influence. And so Rupam says, somebody having a lot of influence on the requirements. So that's a bit of ego. It's a bit of hierarchy. It could be a bit of, you know just organizational politics. How those kinds of things can prevent us from solving problems.
That's a team structure issue, and it goes back to, as you mentioned, many other aspects that can be disintegrated and broken down, but definitely does become an inhibitor to solving for the right problems. And as business analyst, I think you have the All business analysts should speak up. You should have it's your duty, I'd say, it's a mandate for all business analysts to speak up. So when you are in a situation where you feel there's one powerful source or force that is pushing a specific agenda, speak up. And let it be known that you're not too comfortable with going this route because not enough information has been gathered to direct the solution to its most optimum use. Speak up and try your best to raise that. And if you feel uncomfortable to speak up, find someone who can help you to speak up. Don't try to do everything on your own. There's so many other people in the organization. Try find someone who is comfortable to speak up if you're not yet comfortable, but get comfortable as soon as possible. Every business analyst should have that comfort.
Yes, exactly. And that's why I think courage is one of the qualities that you need to have if you're going to be solving a problem, is courage. Alrighty, so Palkesh has the next question. I feel like when you were talking about that analogy of the glass problems versus the plastic problems, you were hinting a little bit at maybe doing some risk analysis of that. Maybe that's a prioritization. I don't know. But I thought this was an interesting question because risk analysis is maybe something that you would want to do when you're thinking about solving the right problem.
I agree. Definitely, you need to know how big the risk is and what the cost of doing nothing is, what the cost of doing something is, or the benefit of doing something is. You definitely have to have a risk analysis approach as a team. So you decide what you work on first, because disintegrating and breaking the work down is also part of solving problems.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I think it's what we're talking here today, right? So we didn't say, well, the first thing that you have to do is root cause analysis. There's many ways to approach this and many different techniques. And so one of them that you might have to consider is simply analyzing the risk of whatever this thing that has just come up. Let's
Yeah, I think that's
see.
that's a really good point. My wife and I are actually going through a decision process right now. We're thinking of moving to a smaller town, and that idea of risk is something that we toyed with. We made a bunch of lists, and one of them was, what are the risks of leaving where we are right now?
Yeah.
So what are those things that we will be missing in order to understand if moving to that new town would outweigh the benefit? Um, it's a big benefit list right now. So we're enjoying going through that process and analyzing, is this a decision we want to make? I think part of problem solving too is how permanent is your decision or your solution, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you can make a decision and you can easily flip it back, that's one thing. But if you flip a switch and it can never ever go back,
Yeah.
if I sell my house where I am and I move to another community, I can never get back to this house I want.
Yeah.
So sometimes that permanency can have an impact too on how you're solving the problem.
Oh, I think, yeah, that's a great point, is thinking just beyond solving it, but thinking about the impacts of the solution. I think is a great is also something to think about. So this one was interesting. So this is from Stephen. A very common source of solving the wrong problem. The customer has already decided what they want to do. That's right. And that will solve it for them without taking a wider view and challenging what the sales droid says. Exactly. I think that's just another one of those constraints. You sort of mentioned that at the top, Scott, was that somebody goes to a conference and they see a cool tool and it's going to solve all the problems.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
and I
sometimes,
think sorry, go ahead,
go
Cathal.
ahead. No, go ahead, Scott.
I think that can be a common thing is, again, jumping to solution. I used to work in a corporate real estate area where all the time people were coming in and asking for, hey, I need this changed. I need, like they came in with a solution of, I need a desk placed here. And I had to train the team to say, what's the problem you're looking to solve? Because they're making decisions and assumptions of, I think I need a desk here, but well, what's the problem you need to solve? Well, we need to get someone else on the team. Well, you know what? We have another space over here that you can use. So constantly asking that question, what's the problem you're trying to solve, can be one of those that you can keep in your back pocket, right? Of pull that out whenever someone comes to you with that solution in mind.
Let's see. All right. So thank you, Stephen. I feel like we've we've probably all experienced that. John just reminded us the business analysis core concept model is a way of I guess an approach to thinking about maybe not so much problem solving, but just kind of laying out um, just providing context, which is important when you're problem solving. Context is important when you're problem solving. All right, let's
Definitely.
see. Who do we have here? We need to spend more time in the problem domain, less on the solution domain. I feel like
Right.
that again. Um, there's there's such a bias towards getting the solution, and
Mm.
I think there's less. I don't know. There's less celebration around really understanding the problem. I feel like
Yeah.
celebration wasn't quite the right word, but it's just not as exciting as coming up with the solution. Let's see. Um, just taking a look because we weren't getting comments, and then all of a sudden we got a lot of comments. So you'll have to pardon me. I'm a little bit behind here. So here's another one. Ego has a huge impact, especially when everyone wants to be praised, right? And I think
Yeah.
that's the point that I was making. There's a lot, when you can be the person that solves the problem, there's a lot of benefits to you. Not so much if you're just the person that's maybe working through that. I wish we would change that in our organization.
Yeah,
All right,
that's a
let's
really
see.
good point. Sort of everyone, well, some people looking to be the hero, right?
Yeah, and that can be an organizational culture. There's a
Yeah.
hero culture where people that can swoop in and solve the problem at the last minute get all of the recognition, and that can create some toxic environments.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a saying about culture, I mean organizational culture, and I think it goes culture eats strategy for breakfast. So organizational cultures are extremely extremely important. They play such a huge role in how the organization is modeled, in the solutions that they work to solve, etc., etc. So I think, yeah, it's something that we need to be very very cognizant of, the organizational culture, and also as business analysts try to influence it. It's something that we should have the ability and the capacity to do. I like that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Let's see. Um, So one of we had a question, and I'm not finding it really quickly, but somebody, oh, here it is. Um, they were asking, so we talked about some of the techniques, and we might just want to go through some of those again, because I think some of those, maybe some folks in our audience haven't heard about those. So I know when you and I were talking, Cathello, we were talking about problem definition. Um, Root cause analysis, SWOT analysis. We've actually got a podcast on SWOT analysis. The fishbone diagram. It's also called Ishikawa. What other techniques do you recommend?
I think we also spoke about design thinking principles, just starting with understanding and empathizing with the customer, then you defining, ideating, prototyping before you implement. So testing your solution before you actually implement it. Other techniques we spoke about is just step back technique that Scott came up with. I like it. The step back technique. Just take a second or two, just step back and breathe. Be in a calmer state so that you can bring about, the most valuable solution. And most of the times when you frazzled or stressed or in panic mode, you don't always come up with the most amazing solutions. There's also brainstorming. Trust the wisdom of the crowd, get more people involved in trying to solve the problem with you. um, yeah, but I think a large portion of them would, fall in your creativity as well. Trust your own computing brain, you've also got your own way of doing things. Trust that as well, but don't always rely on gut feeling or your impulse. Just couple it with data and many other ways that are more systematic and can be proven.
Yep.
Yeah, and Catella, there was another one that you had mentioned at BBC around a decision matrix. Sometimes the problem we're dealing with is so complex that you need to actually make a matrix of this is the issue and these are different options. So that decision
Yeah,
matrix as a tool was a good one as well.
Yeah,
definitely.
and I think helping the team that's working on this problem, giving them ways to visualize that information, I think is another set of skills that you can bring. So I think there's, when I'm listening to us talk today, I'm thinking there's techniques, but then there's a lot of personal skills, social skills, soft skills that you need to bring into this because, let's face it, staying calm can be hard.
Mhm.
If this is a high priority problem where you don't have a lot of time to solve it. But so is being able to lead people through this process and keeping, other folks focused. Like that's a lot of facilitation and communication skills that you need in order to do this. Let's see. So we've got a couple more questions that have just come in. Let's see. Here is one from Gorov. When do you know that you have a good handle and understanding of the problem? How do you stop over analyzing?
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Analysis paralysis. Yeah, I think that's that's something we tend to also get embroiled in as business analysts, where you get so caught up with the analysis that you end up not implementing anything, and it just becomes a beautiful plan, and you've done all with the decision matrix and the fishbone diagrams, and you've got all of them just documented, but there's no solution at the end of the day that a user can consume. So definitely analysis paralysis is a problem. One of the ways you can work against or solve for analysis paralysis is taking it back to the consumer. Take the idea or the one day answer that you have of this particular problem and your proposed solution, take it to the consumer and just ask them, if this had to be the solution, would it work? And then that will guide you, just very quickly on whether or not you are on the right path. Also start testing, your prototypes, testing your hypotheses, test your assumptions, test the information that you have at hand before you do any implementation. But long story short, definitely don't get caught up in analysis paralysis.
Yeah, that's a good reminder. So, and on that note, so that was actually a good segue into this next. So this is a little bit long, but what Luke is saying here is when you didn't necessarily get all of the information you needed from the person reporting the issue, like how hard is it to turn on and blah blah blah, right? Um, so uh, I think there's being able to make sure that you've got all of the right facts, so that as you are again making sure that as you're trying to solve this thing that you are asking the right questions up front to get the information that you need.
Yeah. And also just accept that you may not have all the information that you need upfront, as Susan mentioned. So work with what you have today, and as you get more information, then enhance your solution, enhance what you as the data set or the information that you have about the problem is enhanced. Also, then align your solution with the new information that you have. So I think there's a saying by Oprah: "When you know better, you do better." So accept that you may not know now, but when you know better, then do better. So align the knowledge with your action.
Let's see, how about here's the next one. Another tool I like to use for prioritization is FMEA, failure modes and effect analysis. I don't think I've heard of this, but there's a lot of techniques I haven't heard of. It describes the different ways a process can fail and the consequences of those failures. So there you go. That's another tool that somebody has suggested. And it looks like they've also left a link if you want to explore that a little bit more. Let's see. All right. Um,
And we do have a link to share with the audience. We had talked about this earlier before the broadcast. Every year, IIBA does a survey for
hmm,
business analysis, and it allows people from around the globe to participate. I'll throw up the graphic here. It's called the Global State of Business Analysis. So Brenda's in the chat there. She will post a link there. You can participate in that, and then members get to see the results of what that is. We generally release a public infographic for the high level information. But if you love analysis and data, that's a wonderful survey.
yes, most definitely. Let's see. All right. Well, I have lost I have lost the one that I just tagged. Okay, well let's just keep working. Let's just keep sharing some of these quotes because we're getting a lot. So this LinkedIn user said defining the existing criteria when doing your analysis can help you avoid analysis paralysis. Thank you. That's a good reminder. Here's a question from Roseanne. Stakeholder analysis is key to working through the problems. I think that's a good point. Making sure you have the right people at the table. So
That
taking a little time to make sure you have the right people. Yep. Thanks. Thanks, Roseanne.
Yeah, great call out.
Yep. Let's see. How about this? I think Stephen has sent us another one. I found that anything that isn't working on a solution is viewed as wasting time. Again, just fix it. So there's that organizational, um, issue with we don't we just need to fix it. Whatever. Stop talking. Get it done. Let's see. I
Whether
think
it's
this
the
was
wrong
it.
person or right.
So here's a question. So getting to an official solution, is it worth investing the time in a real business case documentation?
Getting to an official solution.
So I interpret this question as is it worth it to produce any kind of official documentation of what you've just done or what you are doing?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let me just, we've been going through a large business case here at IIBA, and let me put some context around where I think this question is. So if you've got a decision that needs to be made through a business case, how much time do you put into it? It depends on how much the cost is. If you're dealing with something that's multi-million dollars, you probably want to lock it down pretty well in terms of your confidence level and the budget you've done, the research you've done. If it's a decision where you're spending maybe $2,000, likely not. So you mentioned this earlier, Susan. Context really matters, and I think that's really applicable on a business case. We were working through one at the end of last year where we thought we were getting to a business case. We thought we found a solution. We were pricing it out. We put it in front of a bunch of users, and it ended up being very difficult to use. So we
Mm,
ended up having to walk back from that, and then go through the whole process again. So we went from analysis to solution, and then we had to go back to analysis again to
mm,
get to a solution. But we ended up with a really good solution, because we realized partway through where we thought we were focused was actually on the wrong thing. So it really, this is the classic. It depends
it
um,
depends.
on what you need. I would say you want to decide whether it's high cost, high risk, high impact would be the three key areas to determine how much you're going to put into that business case.
Yeah. And I was just thinking, what I think people feel a lot like solving a problem means there's an immediate issue that we need to solve, but that can be part of what you've got to discuss in the problem solving. Is this a longer range issue that we've got to solve, or is this something that our system is offline and we've really got to solve this problem? So there's taking action now, which you probably don't need the documentation for that. And then there's the longer range problem where the people that are going to make those decisions aren't even in the room and they just need something to rely on for their decision making. So I don't know, Gisela, do you think there's other kinds of factors you might think about when deciding, do I need documentation for this?
Yeah, I think you also can be guided by your policies and the organizational culture. You can be guided by the way the teams are structured from communication perspective. Are they more into chatting via Teams, or you have to make a formal call or a Teams call with them? Do you have to, as mentioned, write a 100-page document for them to then only meet with you? So there's so many aspects that can be considered, but really, really look at your organization, look at how they work, and try to align, to that. If it's correct, if it's not, do change it. But from a legal compliance and also just being able to CYA, try your best to document as much as you possibly can, so that tomorrow when someone develops something completely out of what you had initially proposed, you can pull that particular document out and say, look, this is not what I actually had documented, and it goes completely against it. So yeah, maybe as a CYA, do document.
Or here's how we got to that decision. If you feel like
Yeah,
it might be a decision which people might question, it's good to have that backup.
yeah.
Yeah, so CYA, most definitely. Okay. Well, I think we are just about at the end of our time. I know there was one more thing that we wanted to talk about, and Casella, you reminded us of that when you joined us today. So it is Women's Month, right? Um,
Yeah.
in South Africa. So we want to say really we want to send a shout out to all women everywhere globally, but also in South Africa. That's something that they're celebrating. And fun fact, I'm going to be doing a virtual talk on Women's Day in South Africa next week. And so I'm really excited about that opportunity. Yeah. All right. Gathello, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been so great having you here. So thanks for making the time.
Thank you for having me, Susan and Scott. Really appreciate having the conversation and this amazing platform that you've created. Just parting shots for the audience members. Just know that there's no problem too big for you to solve. Try your best using different approaches, but don't ever be too overwhelmed by that problem. Always try your best to, if you are too overwhelmed, speak to someone else who can hopefully try to help you. And then one last thing about the tools and the technologies, try your best to learn as many of them as possible. There's machine tools now, AIs and machine learning, etc. So use that mental or that machine capacity, and also use your mental capacity as a force for good. And then one last thing, a man who only has a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. So get as many tools, just to confirm.
You have no idea how much this quote is like right at the heart of Scott as a woodworker. He's a woodworker.
Yeah. I have many
Nice.
hammers.
And he has many hammers.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Gathello.
Thank you so much, Scott. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you. Now, we'll be back in 2 weeks, and we're going to be talking about building confidence in your career. Maybe you're being held back, but maybe it's really because of something something's going on with your confidence. Well, we're going to be talking with Paula Bell. She is the BA martial artist, and we're going to hear more about how you can build confidence. So we'll see you in 2 weeks from today. Thanks so much for joining us.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and we'll leave another one right here for you to help you in your business analysis career. If you haven't subscribed to the IIBA YouTube channel yet, you can click over here and click on the bell icon to get notified every time we publish a brand new video.